and Connie with Orson Gigi. We are going to be talking all about chocolate tempering today. This is like the most requested video that we get when it comes to using good quality chocolate, which we feel like you are here right now looking at chocolate, so you've already made that step to get into good chocolate world.
And we want to take you to that next level. This is what it takes. Tempering chocolate is your gateway to using the good, high quality, delicious tasting, beautifully performing couverture chocolate. Using the good chocolate is going to make such a big difference in the products that you're making. So that's what we're here to do today, is teach you how to temper your chocolate correctly so it'll give you a beautiful result and performance every time.
So if we jump to the very beginning of chocolate and looking at the ingredients that are involved in chocolate, we've got two major components.
So when chocolate is produced, it's ground into cocoa solid and cocoa fat. Cocoa solid is like your cocoa powder that you bake with, your traditional Hershey's cocoa powder. And it's going to give you that nice chocolate flavor. Then the cocoa fat is a cocoa butter or a vegetable solid that is naturally occurring in chocolate. When they break those two apart and then they mix them back together, it gives you your different levels like semi-sweet, milk, and then there's that outlier, which is white chocolate.
Which isn't really chocolate,
No.
but it does have cocoa butter into it, so it gets to be part of the family.
But it has no cocoa solid, which is why it's white, because that brown cocoa solid is removed from the product. So high quality chocolate uses just cocoa butter as its vegetable fat, and that's what gives you a really smooth, creamy texture in your mouth. Like when you pop chocolate in your mouth and it just melts really nicely on your tongue, that's a high quality chocolate.
This is what you want.
That's the mouthfeel, right?
Yes.
That's the part that you're like, that's the experience I came for. Now, on the flip side, manufacturers will make a compound chocolate, which uses a different vegetable fat, like palm kernel oil or sunflower oil. And those are a more stable fat, but that also means they're a little bit waxier. So if you've ever had chocolate and you're like, that tasted kind of waxy to me, like it kind of coats your mouth instead of melting your mouth, that's a compound chocolate. And the reason they make that kind of chocolate is so it will set up beautifully every time. All you do is melt it, dip, and it's gonna have a beautiful result, but the flavor's lacking. So today we are going to set compound chocolate aside, save that for your caramel apples, save it for your
pretzel rods,
or coating popcorn.
or even a molded chocolate. Those are all great applications for that. But today we're gonna focus on the really good chocolate.
The good stuff.
And kind of giving you the confidence to be able to do this. Because if we're being completely honest, there were so many years where we just steered people towards the compound because we wanted you to be successful. And since we weren't in your kitchens as you were melting and using it, it felt safer for us to say, oh, just use this compound. But as we have been more comfortable and really developed a skill on how to properly temper chocolate, and it's not that hard, we want to make sure that we're sharing all this information so that you feel successful and you have the confidence to use good chocolate because it's so worth it.
So we are here to empower you to use couverture chocolate. It's your day. You ready? Let's do this. So what you're gonna start with is a high quality chocolate. On our bags, they're going to show you on the label, it will say couverture on that orange bar there, or compound. So you're gonna start with a high quality couverture chocolate. And there are two different forms it comes in.
Actually, three. You've got the larger wafers,
Yes, that's
calaes,
true.
and then also the blocks.
Yes, and all of them have their advantages. So if you're using a block, you're going to start by cutting it into smaller chunks so that you can melt it easily. So I like to break off a big piece from my block and then I'm just gonna carefully cut some smaller chunks off of it so that it will melt evenly when it's time to melt it.
And for many years, couverture chocolate was only made available in a block form. So if you had, say, a grandma who did a lot of candy making, you probably have memories of the chocolate block sitting on your table. But the manufacturers became wise to the fact that it's hard to store and sometimes it's hard to use because you have to chop it up to such small pieces. So, which is why the wafers or the small discs are now introduced into the couverture form. But sometimes people have assumed that it is the compound because it is a disc. So it is so important to pay attention to the label, pay attention to the ingredient, and realize there's so many different ways this is available.
Yes, because these little wafers are way different than a chocolate chip.
Absolutely.
A chocolate chip is engineered to hold its shape. So you melt it, it stays lumpy. These are gonna melt and be beautifully smooth. But they're not going to set up correctly if they're not tempered. And so that's where you can decide if you prefer the block or the wafers. and start with your good high quality chocolate.
And we think that there's pros and cons to both. Aside from having to chop and store this, I love tempering with a block.
Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about how you temper with a block versus a wafer and the advantages of both of those when we get into tempering. The next thing you're gonna wanna have is some equipment. The first thing is a good bowl. We're gonna do our tempering in the microwave. So we prefer plastic or silicone. These plastic bowls are really inexpensive, and they're going to not retain heat, so they're not gonna burn your chocolate as easily as glass or ceramic. So a plastic bowl is a great place to start, and you'll wanna use the same plastic bowl for chocolate every time. If you mix this with other flavors, like Italian dressing,
It's happened.
garlic,
Yes.
don't marinate your meat in this. This is gonna be your chocolate bowl. This plastic will absorb flavor, and then chocolate also absorbs a lot of flavor. So don't mix flavors, try to keep those separate.
Storage tip, I really store my chocolate bowl away with my chocolate. So that way it's not being used by my family for
Hide
other
it.
things.
Yeah.
This is really just so we know that there's no other flavors that the chocolate is gonna try and pull out.
Yes. And then you're going to need some kind of spatula. You can use silicone. I love these little plastic spreaders. The 99-cent one, they scrape the side of the bowl really well. And the best thing is I just leave it in the bowl and put it in the microwave. And
Yes.
I don't even have to take it
No
out.
mess on the counter.
Yes. So those two things are really helpful. The other thing you're going to need is a thermometer. So we'll show you both ways today. This is an infrared thermometer. It'll take the temperature of the surface of your product. So this is zero mess. It's great for candy making, chocolates, but not great for meat or breads because it won't tell you your internal temperature.
No. That's where the ThermoPen is in. This will give you like a 2 to 3 second read time, which is fantastic when you're trying to get that perfect temperature
Yes.
of chocolate.
Yes, so you'll want an instant read thermometer. If you use like one of your old school candy thermometers, it's gonna take the temperature so slowly, it's gonna be really frustrating. So having the accurate temperature is critical when you're tempering chocolate. So start with a good thermometer and that'll help make sure you are successful. So once you've got your chocolate ready, you're going to decide how much you want to be dipping with. And you're gonna divide it into thirds. So you're going to put 2/3 of the chocolate into your bowl.
2/3 of your finished amount.
Yes, so if you want to end up with 1 cup to dip with, you're going to do a 2/3 cup into your bowl. Here's a rough estimate.
And again, this is totally eyeballing. Do not think this has to be weighed out. This is just kind of a rough estimate.
Yes, it just gives you kind of a guideline. So what you'll do is you're going to start melting this chocolate. And what we're doing is we are melting the cocoa butter in your couverture chocolate to be the same level of unstable. And what that does is it breaks down all of the cocoa butter so it's completely melted. And once we're there, then we can start rebuilding it correctly to help it temper the right way.
As you're picking your chocolate, are you particular about which brands you're using? Or say if I've got a mixture of some leftover couverture chocolate, am I okay to put them together?
Yes, yes. So couverture chocolate can mix with couverture chocolate, but you cannot mix compound into couverture. It'll make it lumpy and chunky. So yeah, you could totally make a custom blend if you want.
So this is something fun if you are creating something to sell. You'll have your own blend of chocolate. So pay attention to those ratios because people become familiar with that flavor and would want it again and again.
Yes.
But have fun with it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think chocolate is so preferential. It totally depends on what you notice in the chocolate. So tasting it is really important. And knowing the different levels of cocoa solid that you like, if you like a 60% cocoa or a 35% cocoa, you know, tasting it will really help you decide what chocolate is your preferred.
Such a hard job to have to taste the chocolate.
Yeah, it's like you asking us what soda we like to drink. Everybody has such a unique preference, so we can't tell you our best chocolate is totally up to you. You've got to taste it and know it for yourself. So yes, you can totally mix couverture chocolates. When you're melting your chocolate, you want to kind of get to know your microwave. If your microwave is super powerful, you'll want to reduce the temperature to about 50%. With this microwave, we're okay to keep it at full power, and we'll start by microwaving it at 1 minute increments. And once we start melting, we'll start reducing it to about 30 seconds and then 10 seconds. And what we're doing is we're reaching a heat to temperature. So for dark chocolate, it's 115 to 120. For milk chocolate, you're going to heat it to 115, and to white chocolate, you're heating it to 110 degrees. And then once we reach that, then we'll show you what to do.
Err on the side of low and slow. It's so quickly to burn and oftentimes melts quicker than some people will think. So if this is your first time doing it, you're not familiar with this specific chocolate or your microwave with the chocolate, err on the side of low and slow.
Yeah, good rule of thumb.
All right, this is after 1 minute. One thing to always remember with melting chocolate is if you're looking just on the outside, because the microwave heats from the center out, it's doing work in there that you may not be able to see. So stirring it, taking it out is so important to ensure that you're not gonna be burning your chocolate.
Yes, then we just leave the spatula in, microwave for 1 more minute. Okay, this is after 2 minutes. You'll notice there's still a few lumps, but as I stir those together, all that ambient heat's gonna just keep melting those lumps.
I've noticed that you haven't worried about taking the temperature yet.
Not yet, yeah. So now that I'm to this point, I'm going to use my thermometer and I'm trying to get it to 115 to 120. So I'm at 107 right now. And in order to make sure all that cocoa butter is melted completely and cocoa solid, I'm going to keep microwaving this. But I want to just do it in really slow increments till I reach that heat to temperature.
Because you're so close.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, so since I only need to go about 7 or 8 degrees, I'm going to put it back in the microwave for like 20 seconds and then see where we're at then.
How long was this?
This was 12 seconds.
12. Yes.
And we're at 117.9.
And what was it before?
It was 106.
Okay, so
we went up like
12
11
seconds,
degrees.
11 degrees.
And I'm not melting a lot of chocolate here. Obviously, if you have a bigger bowl, you're gonna need to increase your times a little bit. But for your first time tempering, start with just a little bit. It's much easier to temper that way. So once you're at your heat to temperature, you're going to use your reserved chocolate. Now this is called seed chocolate. The seed is what provides the structure. So imagine like a big pile of Legos on the floor.
I love this analogy.
And if you were trying to stack them up, but you weren't hooking them together, your Lego structure is obviously just gonna like flop all over the place. So your seed chocolate provides that solid structure for the cocoa butter to build on. So when we're using wafers, we're just gonna add about half of the remaining third that you had left back into your bowl. But if you're using a wafer or a bar of chocolate, you can just put this whole chunk in and that's going to become your seed. And this just gives, it's like training, it's boot camp, right? It's training the chocolate, telling that cocoa butter what to do. Get in line.
We do love the block for this reason because it's a little bit easier to then once your temperature or your chocolate does reach the temperature, it's way easier to fish a block out versus kind of like finding all those pieces. So
Yes.
when you're using the smaller pieces for seeding, just err again on the side of less because you can always add a little bit more to help cool it down. But once you dump that whole thing in there, it's hard to kind of dig them out.
Yes, yes. So you don't need to add your entire remaining part. What I'm gonna do is just start stirring this and I'll pour in about half of it. And then there are 3 things that chocolate needs as it tempers. So one is time. You really can't rush tempering chocolate. It's a process. And I think that's kind of the fun thing about it.
Yes.
Is we're in this like mode of convenience sometimes, and when you're in a rush, stick with compound. But when you want to really enjoy and savor the process, what you got to do is stay close with that bowl of chocolate. It's becoming your best friend. So don't walk away from it. You've got to give it the time it needs.
And the same attention is applied to compound chocolate. So when we say like, oh, this is one of the most important steps, this applies to all chocolate as you're melting it. So essentially, like, just know that this is required for all melting.
Needs your attention. The other thing it needs is the correct temperature. So using your thermometer is going to become your best friend with tempering chocolate. We've had people come in and they're like, my grandma always tempered chocolate and she just tested it by putting it on her lip. So I don't know how to do that. And I'm like, we don't know either. That's not our lip. But you can use the thermometer using these windows, your heat to and your use at temperature. That's what's gonna make this golden for you. That's the ticket.
When it becomes something so familiar, then you can start applying those, like getting to know you measures. For instance, like you've made a chocolate chip cookie a million times. You know how much flour to add. You know.
For sure. Yeah.
So just pay attention to those things. But if you're just getting started or not as familiar, save those for grandma.
Yes. And I'll be honest, this is probably like the 100th bowl of chocolate I've tempered, maybe even more than that. And I use my temperature guide every time. I just always want to make sure that I'm staying really consistent because this is where it really matters. Guessing is not your
No
friend
one
with
is
temperature.
above using a thermometer and remembering those temperatures.
Yes.
So just know this is used by the experienced and the non-experienced, all included, need to understand temperature.
So we have time, temperature, and the last thing is movement or agitation. So while
this is not your movement, because do you remember last year when Candace and I?
Yes. Candace and Heather tried to temper their own bowl of chocolate, and they got distracted by Mariah Carey. And I'm like watching them do like a dance party, and I'm like, the bowl of chocolate, you guys forgot about it. And did it work?
No, we had to go through the process again. So again, this is between you and your bowl of chocolate.
Yes.
Get Mariah Carey out of there.
Yes. Mariah Carey's for later. This is an intimate moment with your bowl of chocolate. Just the two of you. So while I'm moving that around, I'm noticing that I don't have any lumps left, and I'm going to check my temperature. I'm at 92, and I need to be at 89 before I'm ready to use. So that means I need to add a little more seed back in.
Don't dump that whole cup
No,
left.
I'm just going to do like a few little seeds in there. Okay. And this is where if you have your chunk in there, you can just keep stirring that. If your entire chunk melts all the way, then you need to add another chunk back in. So you'll need seed until you reach that use at temperature. And that will just keep your bowl structuring correctly so you have a nice finished result. The temperature of your kitchen will make a difference. So I like to keep mine under 70 degrees, and that will help my chocolate temper faster. And then once I dip with the chocolate, it'll set up quicker and I'll have a better result there. Another thing is humidity. So 2 things that ruin your chocolate. Number 1 is water. So if any kind of moisture is introduced to your chocolate, and if you've had this happen before, you're probably nodding your head at home saying like, yes, I've totally destroyed that bowl of chocolate. It will seize, so it makes it lumpy and chunky and grainy.
Like sand was added to it.
Yes, and that means there's been moisture incorporated into your chocolate, and since there's so much oil in chocolate, they don't get along well. You don't have to throw that chocolate away. Add like some whipping cream and make a ganache with it, or truffle filling. That chocolate is not destroyed.
You
but
can
it's
get it down for like a chocolate sauce, right?
Yes, yeah, drizzle it on stuff, but it's not going to set up correctly like
For dipping.
a nice tempered chocolate will. The other thing that will ruin your chocolate is temperature, and chocolate doesn't like really sharp contrasts in temperature. So that's why we recommend heating it slowly, but also if you are dipping with something and then you put it immediately into the fridge, it's also going to shock your chocolate. So try to be gentle with it. We've had people come in and complain like, oh, my chocolate wouldn't set up, and I couldn't get it to set up, and when it finally did, it was all bloomed.
Yes,
and
white.
And so they'll explain to us what was going on, and earlier that day, they were boiling a pot of soup. And the humidity in your kitchen can really make a difference. So if you're in a humid climate, you can try to dehumidify the air a little bit, cool things down, and try to keep it a really stable environment for your chocolate. Most kitchens are good to go, but if you notice some of those extremes, temperature or moisture in the air, that could be impacting your chocolate.
Another question that we get a lot, this is referred to as the seed method, right?
Yes.
The tempering. Can you explain like what seed is?
Yes, so seed is chocolate that is tempered. It's manufactured. When you buy it in the wafer or in the brick, it is already tempered.
So it's not a different chocolate. Sometimes people think it's like a separate, like you
good
have
question.
a regular chocolate and a seed chocolate. It is the same chocolate that you started with. It's just still in its solid form.
Yes.
But what if I have, so say like we use this chocolate right now and I have some leftover chocolate towards the end, it may get out of temper. Can I then use that as my seed chocolate the next time?
No.
Okay.
So this chocolate, once it's tempered, can be dipped with and used. Then it's going to harden in your bowl, or you can pour it into a plastic bag. And when it sets up after the tempering process, it doesn't set up at the correct rate, and so it comes out of temper.
Okay.
So this chunk of chocolate that we have left over
And
will,
like this, right?
yes, when it sets up, it has like these streaks, that's blooming, and that's just your cocoa butter coming to the surface. So it can be reused as many times as you want, but it cannot be the seed chocolate.
So I can use that to then get to this point.
Yes.
But just not this part, right?
So you'll always need a little bit of chocolate to seed with. Now, there are some other options. If you're not going to use seeding, you can use a cocoa butter solid, and you can temper with that.
Okay.
And you sprinkle some of that into your chocolate. There also is a kind of an older technique called mush.
Yeah.
And you would pour it onto like a beautiful granite slab or marble slab.
Cold counter.
Yes, a cold surface, and then you stir the chocolate using like a scraper. Some people use their hands. That's a really hands-on approach.
Very old fashioned.
Yes.
It's like going back in school for that.
This is like pre-microwave era for chocolate. So this is my preferred method because it doesn't require anything special. It just uses the same bag of chocolate that you're already gonna melt with. So that's why I like to use the seed method.
But if you're the chocolate that you were initially starting with happened to get out of temper, it can no longer be used to do this.
To seed with, yeah, it can be eaten, but you'll need new.
So just
chocolate.
be mindful of that as you're going to temper.
Yes. So once you've reached your second temperature, your use at temperature, so I'm at 86. I'm a little bit below the preferred temperature for dark, but that's okay. What we're gonna do is do a sample. So this is just a little tiny strip of parchment paper, and I dip it into my bowl, and then I'm gonna scrape off the bottom, and I lay it on another piece of parchment paper, and I'm gonna let that set up. The things I'm looking for in properly tempered chocolate is a beautiful shine when it's finished. It's going to have a snap to it when I break it, and it will be a consistent color. It's not tempered correctly if it melts upon contact, like if your fingerprint touches it and it leaves a big fingerprint. If there's any sort of bloom, and that would include streaks or small little dots that come to the surface, or if it's just kind of dull in finish. So your best finish is gonna come if you pour your chocolate into a mold, and that will give you like that really shiny, glossy, beautiful look. If you're dipping by hand or with forks or something and you let it set up in the air, it's not going to have that level of shine, but you'll be able to tell the difference because it won't smudge when you touch it.
Chocolate's kind of like a copy machine. Anything that you place it against, it's going to give you that same appearance. So if you have a beautiful, smooth polycarbonate mold, that's how you're getting those crisp, clean lines. But say if you took a spoon or something to it and it has a divot, it will mimic any lines, any texture. Even if it's a subtle piece of parchment, it will still mimic those things.
Sure.
Tell me why you pick a piece of parchment versus say like a butter knife or...
Yeah, I like the piece of parchment because when it sets up, I can manipulate it and snap it. And I'm looking for like that beautiful, satisfying crunch that tempered chocolate gives you. You can, if you don't have parchment, you can test it on like the tip of your spatula, but you just won't be able to bend it and see what
But that's an
the crunch
important
looks
part
like.
of what people are looking
Yes.
for. So that will help.
Yes. But you could do like a little piece of wax paper or something else. You could also just like put a dab onto parchment like this, and then you can peel that off. Yeah. But this is just your insurance policy.
Yes.
This is what you do to make sure that your chocolate works before you dip all your truffles or your salted caramels or whatever product you're dipping. And so once I make sure it's in temper, then I can use this bowl of chocolate until it's finished.
So say if I've got, we've got the cousins, the sisters, everyone's
Yeah.
coming over, we've got tons of bowls of chocolate. Would you
So
recommend testing it maybe throughout the process, or is this kind of just like I test it once and I'm good to go?
Yeah, so as long as it stays below the use at temperature, it should stay in temper. It's going to cool while you're using it. So if you need to, you can heat it very gently and really slowly, like seriously 4 seconds on the microwave. And keep it under your use at temperature. If you reach over that use at temperature, you've got to start the tempering process over again, which doesn't hurt the chocolate. It's not a problem. It just takes a little bit of time.
Okay.
So some things that we recommend, you can use like a heating pad and take the cloth cover off of it, put it directly under your bowl of chocolate.
It's low, right?
Yeah, on the low temperature, and it will help keep it warm. Some people will put it over a bowl of, or a pan of boiling water and just a little bit of steam to help keep the temperature. You'll need to switch this to glass or ceramic at that point. I found it's easiest to just use it. If it starts to get kind of thick and it's hard to dip with, then I will just microwave it really slowly and keep it under the use at temperature. Another thing that's helpful is if you just keep scraping the side of your bowl.
Which is why you love this spoon.
Yes.
Or spatula.
Yes. This multi-tool. This everything tool. I like to scrape it that way and then just melt it really slowly and keep it under my use at temperature. If you're worried, after you microwave, you can do the test strip again and just make sure you're in temper. But we're getting there. It's nice and cold in this kitchen. So it's setting up beautifully. It's getting nice and hard, a really consistent coloring. And I'm gonna give it one more minute and we'll do that.
Say I'm
snap.
nervous.
It feels so good. So at this point, that's when you could pop it in the fridge and make sure that it's nice and cold and test your snap.
What are some other things that you want, like advice people went with, like either using your chocolate or storing your chocolate or?
Yeah, so chocolate actually has a really great shelf life if it's stored properly. And because we mentioned it's really absorbent, you'll want to keep it away from other odors, even other flavored chocolates or Some people put like all their baking supplies in the same thing, and if it's next to peppermint oil, you're gonna have mint chocolate. Or if it's next to laundry detergent,
Happened to me.
it's gonna taste like
It
soap.
wasn't next to it. It was like the top of the pantry and the bottom, but you know, close enough still.
If you keep it in like an airtight container or like those Vaxil
Yes.
things, you know, any way you can keep it away from other odors is gonna help preserve the flavor of your chocolate.
I actually have a big plastic tub with all my chocolate in it, and each of them I have a white one, a milk one, a dark one, and a flavor, like a colored one. And so I want to keep them all separate from each other so I have the true amount of flavor. And then they're inside their own bin. So they're like vacuum sealed in a tub and then another tub.
They're triple protected.
No more laundry soap.
No.
Chocolate.
Once you make caramel apples that taste like soap, you've learned your lesson.
I still have those memories, by the way.
So gross. So gaggy. Yeah, so storing it away from other odors, and there's kind of like this old tradition that people pop their chocolate into the freezer because freezer should save everything.
Everything.
But there's a lot of moisture in the freezer, and there's also reducing it to that really low temperature can change the texture of your chocolate. So we say like 60 degrees is perfect, kind of in a cool, dark place. But if you notice while your chocolate is being stored, if it starts to kind of get cloudy looking and you'll notice like some bloom on it, that's totally fine. That means the temperature changed a little bit in your chocolate. Some of the cocoa solid or cocoa butter came to the surface, and it can melt and be reused many times.
It's still
so
fine.
don't, even
It's
on your
not
chocolate
old.
chips, yeah. People are like, is this moldy? That's definitely not mold. It's just the cocoa butter, and once it's melted, it's gonna look beautiful, and you're not gonna notice any difference in flavor.
What are
or
some
taste.
signs of, we got sent a message the other day that had a really, really old bag of chocolate. I think I'm not kidding you, I want to guess it was 10 years old. And she said, how do I know if this is good? So what are signs that we can like share what to look for?
Yeah, I mean, you could always taste it. If it tastes fine, it's gonna be fine. It'll work totally okay. If you've got product that, you know, like this looks destroyed, right? That looks like, what? Can I use that chocolate? But it's totally usable. So another thing you can do is melt it and see what the texture is like. If it's really lumpy and chunky and it's not melting correctly, then maybe it's better for like a mousse or a ganache. But as long as it melts okay and it tastes okay, you can use that chocolate forever.
So really just look for taste and texture.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Are we ready? Do you think?
Yes, I think we're ready. So now we're gonna test our strip. Let's see, what's our best view? Ah, did you hear it? Yeah, we heard that. That is a beautifully tempered piece of chocolate. So once you're there and your chocolate is ready, you can dip away. We love dipping caramels, truffles, all sorts of things inside your tempered chocolate. And you're gonna notice a really big difference in flavor, texture, shine, and most of all, just, you know, you've gotten to know this bowl of chocolate, and so you have filled it with love, and whoever is gonna eat it, they're gonna feel
It's
it.
going to appreciate it,
They're going to
especially
feel
this year where we're all just missing a little bit of each other. This is a great way to share your kitchen with someone else and all those people that you love. Yeah. So if we were to leave with 3 tips, what would you leave so that you feel confident in tempering?
3 tips. Use the right temperature, so use your thermometer. Heat slowly, make sure you don't burn your chocolate, and just get to know it.
Yes.
Take your time and enjoy the process.
Start small and
Yes.
just know that it's going to be forgiving. And if at the end of it doesn't work out, you can always drink it.
Yes.
Thank you, Connie. Thank you for sharing
Yes.
your tempering tips. We hope this gives you the confidence to then go and use the best quality chocolate that we can provide, because we truly believe that it makes a huge difference. And we let that chocolate flavor shine.
Yes, don't hold back.
No.
Set your chocolate loving selves free.
Have fun.
Bye.